Hello and welcome to another edition of On the Mic with Mike. I am so happy to say that this time around, my guest is Nurse Iris Lake Ryan, passionate Montserratian. Welcome to the program, Nurse.
Hi, Mike. It's a pleasure to join you here, especially I love that part about Montserrat. Keep it going.
So what we are talking about is this matter, very serious issue of the rights or not of Montserratians in the diaspora to vote or otherwise in some way participate in the electoral process. It just so happens that as we are speaking, just a day or two ago, the date for the next election was announced. So that actually makes this a bit more pertinent. I doubt if anything could be done, if there were anything to be done to change the situation, but it certainly would help to inform whatever policies there might be going forward. So just a bit of background. You are I shouldn't even say professional nurse because a nurse is a professional anyway, but you are living and working. Should I say between Montserrat and the United States? Would that be correct?
That would be fair. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So then, nurse, on this matter of the diaspora to vote or not to vote or how to vote or if at all in Montserrat, broadly speaking, first of all, where do you stand on this?
Okay. On this matter, it's twofold for me. I have two thought processes on it. And I mean, I'm sure, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I know there are going to be those who will agree and those who will disagree, but I want to keep in mind that this is my opinion. So that's what I'm putting forward. I say twofold because one, I think that Montserratians in the diaspora there are different types of Montserratians out here. There are some Montserratians who have been born there and they never go back. There are people who are living here and they are back there all the time. And there are some people who are intermediate. So I think that basically it depends on where you fall on that spectrum. And that's not to single out anybody, because I want to make it very clear that I'm not talking about whether you're more Montserratian or than another person. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you spend as much time in Montserrat to warrant a say in Montserrat, there are people in the diaspora as well who have own properties in Montserrat and spend quite a bit of time there. Those people have a vested interest in Montserrat. Whatever happens in Montserrat affects them directly because their investments are there. They're putting income into Montserrat. They're spending money there. It should be categorized, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I think there should be special provisions made for members of the diaspora. And this is a short answer. I think provisions should be made for members in the diaspora who spend an X amount of time on Montserrat, who have property on Montserrat. There's no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to vote. You're a citizen, you're born a citizen, you're always a citizen. But spending that much time, and I will give you an example as to why I take this position, Mike, because on average, I'm speaking personally on average, I'm in Montserrat maybe about 4 or 5 times a year. And when you total that time up, it's interesting to see how much time that is exactly. So that's my short answer. I think it should be provisional.
As a matter of fact, based on what you've just outlined there, I think we could just wrap up the conversation now because you've hit the nail on the head perfectly. Now, let's, however, go into a bit more detail on that very important point that you've raised about categorization, because what we seem to have, and from the people whom I've spoken with so far on this matter, is concern about, A, the vagueness of what exists at the moment. And on the one hand, it's vague, but on the other hand, it is so specific that it blocks a lot of people. And we even have the Electoral Commission saying that they need guidance from the legislators to determine exactly what they want to have in place. And I always refer back to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, which in its 2014 report also pointed out that the Montserrat situation regarding diaspora and voting and this whole issue of being domiciled, how vague it is. So your point about having different categories, I think perfectly illustrates a direction that we need to go in. So then I would want to ask you, how do we arrive at that? How do we get to that? What would you like to see done?
Okay. There are times, and I'm going to, again, draw an example. If you hold an American, let's say a green card, I'm not going to say a passport yet. We're going to say a green card. And you leave the country and you spend a number of months outside of the country. When you get back in, the immigration officer is going to look at you and wonder, well, where have you been? Why are you there? Or why have you been out of the country this long? So let's reverse that. You're going to Montserrat, let's say for a month, 4 times a year. You can do the math. I know that you're smart. So you can do the math and see how much time an individual would spend in Montserrat. So that is more time spent than, let's say, someone who goes for St. Patrick's and Christmas, which is everyone's right, and we encourage everybody to do that. It's just a matter, again, we're talking about the categorization. And therefore, if you have an individual spending 6 to 8 months of their time in Montserrat, why can't they vote? So the immigration, I guess, once you come in, a record can be kept of how many times you're in the country and how long you stayed in the country. And then you have a certain number of hours that you qualify. I'm planning for retirement, and my retirement is based on how many hours I have put in this particular union. So therefore, we can use that same framework and apply it here. Do you get what I'm saying?
Exactly. And just to add to what you've just outlined there, which sounds very, very practical to me, the Montserrat qualification of voters legislation regarding the issue of time spent actually states in one of the articles that a person would need to have resided in Montserrat for 36 months immediately preceding the date of registration as a voter, or is domiciled in Montserrat and is resident therein at the date of such registration. And inasmuch as that might point to an element of clarity, it just further confuses the situation, because what you've outlined there, this does not seem to take that into consideration, or it puts a tremendous amount of strain, I would say, on the electoral office to make that determination.
Absolutely. Records are simple. And now in this technological age that we're in, or era that we're in, everything can be documented and should be documented. Do you understand? I remember one day thinking back to how many weeks of quarantine that I've spent in Montserrat, for example. And it's amazing how time builds, because initially, remember when you had to do the 14 days, that's 2 weeks. And if you multiply, I've spent over when I checked it, I'd spent almost 100 hours in quarantine in Montserrat, just over time. I can check that. So there has to be a way that can be authenticated. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
so why can't we do that and apply that same principle to the voting process, or the ability to vote?
And it is that accumulated period, which of course would lead to another issue. Well, should it be 36 months, and 36 months for whom? Because what it does in this situation, it actually lumps Montserratians with other members of the Commonwealth. So you could have a situation where a Montserratian or a person from the Commonwealth would, based on this, have more immediate rights to register as a voter in Montserrat based on this than someone who's a born Montserratian who, like yourself, would have spent an accumulated period of time on the island and has not only vested interest as a Montserratian, but has also invested, and even though that also comes up in the discourse as well. What do you think about that?
That is absolutely, in my words, asinine, because I look sometimes at, we in America, incidentally or coincidentally, we are the Montserrat elections and elections here in the US are, for the first time, I think, in a long time, coinciding. So you have people who are Americans living outside America. Mind you, there are some that can vote in absentia. That is completely legal. But there are those who want to make sure that those votes are counted, and they're getting on planes, trains, and automobiles, and they're getting back here into the US to make sure that they can vote. That is their right as born Americans. And I'm still disturbed by the fact that as a born Montserratian, owning property in Montserrat, paying taxes in Montserrat, employing people in Montserrat, that I am spending a lot of time in Montserrat. I do not have that right to vote. But someone can come in from the Commonwealth, and this is nothing against them because we welcome the population increase, but can come into Montserrat, spend some time there. Probably it's a gateway to someplace else. I don't know. But then they have that right to vote. And they're probably, some of them probably don't work or, invest any kind of income into Montserrat, but they still have that right. Where I, as a born Montserratian, I'm rejected from that process, essentially.
I'm sure a lot of people would be surprised to hear that you, I think I'm going to add here, you of all persons, do not have, you have the right, yes, but it does not apply in your case, so you can't vote in Montserrat.
Period.
That's shocking. That is shocking. Taking a side here, that is absolutely shocking. Now, you spoke a while ago about investments and vested interest. Let us expand on those a minute, because there is comments, and to some degree understandable, coming from some people who might still be resident in Montserrat, that, well, you are not living here, and why should you have the wherewithal to impose a government on us, and you leave and you go back to wherever it is in the diaspora that you're living and working. What do you think about that line of argument or that sort of thinking?
I'm puzzled by that approach, because it's almost funny, because when I go to Montserrat, and I'm speaking personally here, when I go to Montserrat, usually when I get to immigration, their first question is, why you don't just stay down here? That's the first question. Now, my passport has so many stamps in it that when I come back in, I remember one time coming back in, and the immigration officer actually asked me, where was this place, Montserrat? So you really seem to love this place, to go to this place often. Or I said, yeah, I love Montserrat. You understand what I'm saying? I was born there. So I'm saying it's obvious to everybody else, except the people to whom it should matter, that I spend so much time in Montserrat. And believe me, if I had more time, I would spend more time. And that's why I'm saying it's not that I'm going to impose on you and then disappear. Okay, that's not what I do, because since I'm always in Montserrat, that does not apply, because I'm feeling the same thing you're feeling. I'm there a lot of the time. I could take a plane and I could pretty much go anywhere on this globe. I get a 2-week vacation, a 3-week, a month, and I'm headed to Montserrat. March, I spent a month there. I was back in June for 2 weeks. I was back in July for another 2 weeks. I mean, total that. That's 8 weeks spent in Montserrat in less than 6 months, or in a 6-month period.
And I just wish to interject here that in this conversation I'm having with you, I had no idea whether or not you were, quote unquote, eligible to vote in Montserrat. So hearing you said what you said before, I mean, that is as much as a surprise to me as it might be to a lot of people. On this matter of investment and vested interest, I come from a perspective that I would like us to develop a bit. And that is, you might not have a physical investment in Montserrat, and some folks do, you do, but as a Montserratian, with relatives, family members, and other quote unquote interests, whatever they might be, we all have a vested interest in Montserrat. We all have a vested interest in how Montserrat is governed, how Montserrat is managed, because if a policy is put in place and that policy has a negative effect on our friends, our relatives, on people to whom we might be sending remittances to one way or the other, that is an effect on a Montserratian, no matter where in the world you are. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's almost like a domino effect. It affects Montserrat, it affects us. Because whenever you go to Montserrat or you're heading to Montserrat, whatever is asked of you or required of you, whether it's a process to own a home, to buy property, to invest in something, whatever is asked of you, you provide that. Okay, you're there. This is what you want to see happen. So you're there. You're handing up. You're giving. So all we're asking for is this right to be able to go in, put our quote unquote 2 cents in, knowing that 2 cents is going to either be a negative value for us or it's going to be a positive, because we're there. That's the most important thing, Mike. We're there. We're experiencing it. Maybe not on a 24-hour basis, but definitely on a regular basis, on a daily basis. I'm virtually in Montserrat. This is an example. I'm virtually in Montserrat on a daily basis. So anything happens in Montserrat, it affects me. If the government closes the country down right now, I'm worried that affects me. If there's a hurricane coming through Montserrat right now, I'm worried that affects me. If I look in my yard and I see a tree falling down in Montserrat, that affects me. If my worker cannot show up to perform the task that I need to do in Montserrat, that affects me. So everything that happens in Montserrat affects me on a daily basis. And that comes with, as you put it, the vested or invested interest in Montserrat.
And yourself as a medical healthcare professional, as an ICU nurse, given the challenges, and yes, I know that a lot of effort over the years has been put into improving the quality of healthcare in Montserrat, but there are some real challenges that we still, and I say we all still have to deal with and still have to overcome. So if a person in Montserrat, a relative or friend in Montserrat, cannot get the health care that they require, almost invariably it falls, yes, on the shoulders of the officials in Montserrat, but also on the shoulders of the relatives and the friends and the healthcare professionals, such as yourself in the diaspora, to chip in and help as well. So that is an effect also.
100%. And I can cite you an incident or a situation when I was on Montserrat. And just for the record, during COVID, I re-registered as a nurse in Montserrat. It was a process. I literally had to go back to my college credits and college courses and college years and all of that to provide that and be able to re-register in Montserrat. And I did so just because I wanted to be available. If anything were to happen or my services were needed, I would not have to wait to go through that process and it becoming time consuming. I registered, prophylactically, so to speak, so that in the event that I'm needed while I'm there, just call me. And that situation actually did occur a couple of years ago. I mean, it might have been about 2 years or maybe a year and a half. And they needed some assistance. There was a case where there was some extreme care needed for a preemie infant. And I was actually in the area. I was in CVs, which were civilian clothes, and I was called upon by the chief nursing officer there, the acting chief nursing officer at the time. Can I come in and pitch in a couple of hours and help? And I was like, absolutely, yes, but I don't have any scrubs here. And she was like, okay, just come on in. We'll go to theater. We'll get you some scrubs and we will, and you can help out. Just please, whatever you can do. And there was a curfew in at that time, because I remember you had to be off the streets. I think it would have been about maybe 10 o'clock. I'm not sure. But I remember my partner having to get clearance to come and pick me up from the hospital after I'd done that shift. And that was fine with me. And that's why I'm there. And they know that. If I'm in Montserrat, please call upon me. I'm there to assist. I'm not going to be in Montserrat and there's a crisis or there's any situation where the hospital is in need, and I'm not going to present myself and be of service. So we're all feeling the effect. It spreads out. It's like it's coursing, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, and that also speaks to a broader issue, that is the value of the Montserratian diaspora as an asset in so many respects to Montserrat, in terms of expertise in specific areas, in healthcare, such as yourself, in making contacts for business, for investments, government-to-government contact. It's all there. So what do you think about that, the diaspora then, as an asset to Montserrat?
It's absolutely, there's so many of us out here. A lot of the time, I speak in the first person because I can speak clearly and without reservation about my feelings, my thoughts, and my actions. But I know for a fact, to include the broader diaspora, I can tell you that there are so many more people out here like me. I'm not in a single-minded environment. There are other people out here who want to do the same thing, who want to get involved, who've tried to get involved. They want to assist. They want to offer their assistance. There's the Village 664 that was just created last year. And those are people who also want to, help Montserrat in any way they can. There's always a way. I have that Easter party every year. Now it's becoming annual for the kids in Montserrat. And that I'm not doing on my own, Mike. That is with the assistance of many people here in the diaspora.
So
many people.
Exactly. And, congratulations to you, and, 100% appreciation for everything that you do, that and everything else that you do. We have an election coming up. I'm not going to ask you, who you support or anything of that sort. But,
if you didn't, Mike, can I just interject and say, even if you didn't, I think that it's been made pretty clear as per social media, but we shall digress. Please proceed.
Okay. All right. So with the election that we have coming up, how is it impacting on the diaspora? Let me use yourself an example. How closely are you following it? How interested are you in it? How affected are you by it?
The answer to that is very, and please allow me to expand, because I've been following it from the time I realized that this was actually since 4 years ago, I started, really investing in the next election and being interested in it. And for me, I'm at this point that my years out here are winding down. Okay, I'm a proud 58-year-old. I have very little time left out here in the diaspora. So what happens in Montserrat going forward for the next 5 to 10 years will directly affect me, where I go, what I do, how I do it, when I do it. So I am very much interested in it. And what I want to see is what is best for Montserrat. put her first. And the person who convinces me the most that Montserrat is they're in the best interest of Montserrat, or whatever they're doing is in the best interest of Montserrat. Even though that's a broad topic, I can break it down. In the best interest of Montserrat, then you have my attention. I read something this morning which I found very disturbing. And that is gonna tie into this, but please allow me to explain.
Okay, continue.
I just read somewhere that the twin otter is gonna be allowed to come into Montserrat now. And as I'm speaking to you on this, I feel the blood boiling in the back of my neck. And there's a reason for that, because for the number of hours that we've spent within the last maybe 2 to 3 years in Antigua trying to get to Montserrat, sans difficulty, it's atrocious to think that no, all of a sudden it's gonna, when you're gonna spring this on me and say, oh yeah, it's okay, the twin otter can come. Okay, last month I left Montserrat a day early, a whole 24 hours earlier than I intended. I spent 24 hours in Antigua doing absolutely nothing, paid to stay in a facility there while I have a home in Montserrat. Why? Because I couldn't get a flight out on the
Can I just interject on that point? Because the same thing happened to me. And what I did, I spent a lot of money getting a taxi to take me on a tour of Antigua. There you go.
There you go. And I know that for a fact. When I was coming down, which was on the 12th of July, I met people in Antigua who'd been there for 3 days. Why? Because they couldn't get a flight down into Montserrat. Imagine coming to Antigua, wanting to come to Montserrat. You can't come to Montserrat for the last 6 months. And all of a sudden, it was right there at the swipe of somebody's pen to have changed all of that. You know what people go through sometimes because they come to Antigua. I'm not a boat person, and I don't have any kind of discrimination against the boat coming down on the ferry. It's just that I have no sea legs. So it's not my transportation of choice. I get sick to my stomach. So I'm always going to go for the plane. But there's some of us who've had to take that ferry down and stomach the journey because there is no other option. It costs me more, or sometimes equally as much, to get to Montserrat as it does to get from New York to Antigua. Now, that's some food for thought.
Well, Nurse Iris Lake, Ryan, I can only put it this way. You have clearly and persuasively outlined it in terms of the specifics of interest and the broader scope of vested interest. As we are coming to the end of our half-hour period together, any final thoughts from you on this very important issue?
Yes. I want to end this by saying to any Montserratian who think, whether in or out of Montserrat, who think that I take Montserrat and Montserrat's election very lightly, need to think again. On average, 365 days a year, sometimes, when I say sometimes, because when there's a leap year, things change. Mm-hmm. And I employ 4 people in Montserrat who have to get paid every month. 80% literally of my salary here in New York ends up in Montserrat. The records can and will support that. I do not take this lightly. I do not take this lightly. And I still am totally upset that this right to vote, simply because I don't live there, is being denied based on the fact that physically I work and live here in the United States. Mind you, I want you to remember, I said 80% of my salary ends up in Montserrat. That's something to think about. I really do appreciate this platform, Mike. It was a pleasure talking to you this morning about something which I'm very, very passionate, very does not even begin, extremely passionate about, which is Montserrat. So thank you. I love Montserrat. And as a matter of fact, here's one thought as you go. I've picked my spot out in Lookout Cemetery overlooking Margarita Bay. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know, I don't know what will.
Wow. Nurse Iris Lake, Ryan, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Michael.